In what has been described as, quote, an attack on France, France's high-speed train lines were targeted by multiple malicious acts just hours before the opening ceremony for the Olympic Games kicks off this afternoon. French President Emmanuel Macron is not only dealing with citizens' disrupted travel, he's also focused on keeping politics out of the Olympics. Macron has called for a, quote, political truce around the world for the duration of the Olympic Games. But that message doesn't seem to have resonated with protesters. Pro-Palestinian protesters already gathered Tuesday in Paris to demand the International Olympic Committee exclude Israel from the Olympic Games. This is not unprecedented, actually, following the invasion of Ukraine. After all, the IOC banned Russia from all team sports at the Paris Games, and the 15 individual Russian athletes who qualified and applied for entry must compete as individual neutral athletes.
As a reminder, athletes are banned from expressing their political views during official ceremonies and competitions, but that does not stop athletes from talking politics at press conferences, which is exactly what happened with Team USA men's basketball yesterday. So Steph Curry and Steve Kerr both expressed their support for Vice President Kamala Harris. Let's watch.
Yeah, very interesting time for our country for sure, and the fact that President Biden gave that endorsement, and Vice President Harris is primed to bring her energy to this campaign, and hopefully, if she's on the ticket winning the election, like it's a big deal to say the least. And she represents the Bay Area. She's been a big supporter of us, and so I want to give that energy right back to her. And just excited knowing, obviously, we're representing our country here, and this is a very monumental next couple months for our country and the direction that we're headed. So hopefully this is a great way to do our part to continue unifying the country with how we, sports brings a lot of people together. And for her in this moment, knowing what's ahead, like we're just all about positive energy and optimism.
Now, the last time I remember politics and sports converging, LeBron James was told to shut up and dribble. There was all kinds of responses, but I think we're at a different political point in this country. And yeah, people expressing their political views on the platform they have is definitely more normalized. Politics, I think, when it was something that you don't talk about it at the dinner table, we don't discuss it, we were at probably a worse political place. I think now that we're more open about the issues, economic issues especially, even in France, they're talking about how ridiculous it is that their country has put so much money into hosting the Olympics and cleaning up the Seine River so that they can host swimming events in it. And they're like, hey, we live here all year. We're the citizens of France. Don't we deserve a clean river? You're just cleaning it up for the company. I think it's a good point to make that everyday people deserve to have a clean country too. That investment is worthwhile 365 days a year, whether the Olympics are being hosted there or not. So there's a lot of politics inherently around the Olympics. It's every country in the world sending athletes to compete for greatness. That's kind of political in itself. And so I think it makes sense to let the athletes talk about politics in their press conferences and, keep the ceremonies to, sports stuff. But there's a very famous photo from an Olympic ceremony in the past that is very political too. So maybe they're trying to avoid that around the Palestine movement.
I agree with you that people have sort of been primed now to expect political opinions from athletes. I'm not sure whether that's a good thing or not. I think generally speaking, it's good to have things in culture and society that are not overtly political, even if there happen to be political undertones. It's nice to have escapes sometimes from these very fraught issues that can be very divisive in our culture. And sports used to be one of those things, at least from the 60s, I would say, or the 70s to the 2010s. And now that so much of our entertainment has become politicized, I think that's actually contributed to the division in our country, because people can't talk about pretty much anything without having some political opinion inserted into it, which naturally ends up leading people, even within their homes, their communities, to argue with one another. And it causes us to really view each other as the enemy. Like, this isn't just someone who thinks that LeBron James is better than Kobe Bryant, but also maybe someone who agrees with LeBron James's political opinions. And I think that can become very toxic. So it's nice to have, I think, the Olympics generally be a place where it's just about national pride and rooting for Americans because we have that shared history and that common element to our existence.
Yeah, I feel like two things are true at once with the Olympics. On the one hand, there's so many problems, there's so much turmoil in the world, domestically, internationally. People are thinking of a million political issues a day. And it feels weird to be like, let's all get together and play with the ball. It feels weird. And it can be true that you also want to say it's okay to have fun. It's okay to turn the politics off for a minute. It's okay to do this tradition that we've done for very many years and compete against each other in sports. I love athletics. I was an athlete. And I feel both of those things at the same time. Like, you don't have to pick a side on those things. And I agree with you about talking about politics. I guess I say that because my family talks about the issues, and I think issues are political. Like, can we afford, to pay the bills? That is a political issue, and you can talk about it without coming at it from right versus left, just talking about it as people dealing with this thing. And I think the more people identify with a particular political tribe or team, if you will, if we're talking about sports, I think that's what leads to so much tension. I've heard about families just disowning each other because someone's a Trump supporter and the other is someone who supported Joe Biden. And that's really sad that can tear apart families. But I do think it's good when people talk about issues. That is talking politics, but without talking about partisan politics. And I think that is good. But when it's just my team versus your team, that's not very helpful as well. So we can learn a lot from comparing sports to politics, I guess, Amber.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I would say that, sports in many ways used to be sort of an outlet for that sort of competition when people identified with different teams and cheered their teams on. And it was a way more to bring people together because it was a very low stakes kind of competition, city versus city or state versus state. But the worst thing that happens when your team loses is you're disappointed for a couple of days and then you gear up for the next season. Politics feels more high stakes now. And so when that team element replaces the team element of sports or other ways that we sort of compete in a sort of friendly manner between states and localities and communities, that ends up leading to this very fraught atmosphere where that person's not just, a Red Sox fan and I'm a Yankees fan, but they're actually supporting a team that could actively hurt me and my family.
I love how we're getting philosophical with this block. Like, what does it really mean, Amber? But
I guess I just don't have strong feelings about Steph Curry endorsing Kamala Harris because it's like, okay, of course. It just is not surprising to me.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I don't think it's going to influence a lot of people. I've heard people say that when the pandemic hit and like competitive sports wasn't happening as much, people decided to cling to politics as like, this is my team and that's your team, because they really wanted that team identity. But I also think there's this factor of people voted one way or another. Maybe they're a lifelong Democrat, they're a lifelong Republican. But as the economic conditions in our country got worse, and as different regions got culturally different and people started living in silos, now you're in the team, and the stakes got higher because conditions got worse. That's how it is. And so I think that made the political divisiveness that much more intense. And so the conditions changed around a political environment where there was a two-party system, which is just a recipe for divisiveness. But I think people are slowly starting to realize that, working people in America, middle-class people in America have a lot more in common than the elites in America. And as we see people criticizing big monopolies, and, some conservative members of the Republican Party are not so happy that J.D. Vance has said he likes the actions of the antitrust division of the Biden administration. But I think that's good, and I think that's the result of working people talking about issues as they exist. Am I confident the Trump administration will appoint someone who's really tough on antitrust? Not yet. No, actually. But I think it's good that the voters are moving in that direction and the population of America is moving in that direction, regardless of what the two-party system looks like and how much they're trying to divide us.
Yeah, I'd also point to, in addition to the economic conditions in the country, but specifically the pandemic as a big driver of this siloing of communities. We were banned from going to church, banned from playing at the local park, and all kinds of other ridiculous lockdown restrictions that really isolated us from our fellow Americans and allowed us to celebrate the fact that even though we're different in a lot of ways, we also have a lot in common. When you don't see someone on a regular basis, or you're not active in your community, and maybe you only communicate online through social media, those things that are different between you seem to get a whole heck of a lot more important than the things that unite us. And I hope that the Olympics can be a somewhat politics-free rallying point for Americans to have a little bit of national pride. But I suppose I'm not optimistic at the same time, just given what we've talked about with the increased politicization of sports. But I know I'm going to try to watch as much of it as possible. I'm sure our viewers are too. Let us know in the comments which events and athletes you're really rooting for, and maybe some of them are the same as ours. We'll be back with more Rising after this.